I've generally come to the view that there are basically two types of people in the world. Those that can look at people different from themselves and see our common humanity and act accordingly,
Hmm.
and those who cannot and do not.
Welcome to 100 Level. I'm your host, Larry Green. 100 Level lives at the intersection of different lived experiences to find and explore our different themes of our shared humanity so that we can learn from each other and grow. In each episode, we'll talk with a special guest about a new topic, and then we'll wrap up with different insights and reflections. And now, let's level up. The word of the day starts with the letter U, and that word is Ubuntu. What? Ubuntu. We're going to learn about what this word means and how it's relevant today. We're going to learn about this word from someone really special, Reuben Brigety, and he recently wrapped up his time as the U.S. ambassador to South Africa. Now, our conversation happened when he was still serving as the ambassador. Reuben has had an amazing career in both the public service as well as the academic world. On the public service side, he served with the U.S. Economic Commission for Africa, the Deputy Assistant Secretary of State with the Bureau of African Affairs, as well as the Bureau of Population, Refugees, and Migration. He was the former mayor of Swanee, Tennessee, as well as a former naval officer. Now, on the academic side, Reuben served as the vice chancellor at the University of the South. He was the dean at the Elliott School of International Affairs at the George Washington University. He was also a professor at George Mason University and the American University. Reuben is a distinguished graduate of the United States Naval Academy, and he also holds a PhD from Cambridge as well as a doctorate from Old Dominion University. So needless to say, there's a lot that we can learn from Reuben. And so now let's dive in. All right. Well, I'm excited to sit down and have a conversation with Ambassador Reuben Brigety. Hello, Ambassador. It's good to hear you.
LG, good to see you. Happy to be with you.
Yes, it is good to see you. That was actually going to be one of our first questions is, can I call you Reuben?
Absolutely. Of course.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. Now, it's super exciting to sit down and spend some time with you. But for all of our listeners and viewers, this is not the first time that we've met and had a conversation. The first time we crossed paths was early 1990s at this fun little school next to a river. And that would be the U.S. Naval Academy. Yeah, we're both class of 1995, so the last century. But yeah, so that's our connection there. But yeah, any thoughts and reflections just really quickly off the top of your head just from Navy?
Sure. Well, first thing I was going to say is anybody who knew me when I had a shaved head and weighed $1.25, called me Reuben back then, can still call me Reuben.
There we go.
So
from the good old days.
It's hard. Exactly. It's hard to believe it's been actually over 30 years since we first met.
Over
we
30
showed
years,
up for an induction day on July 9th, 1991. But a lot of water under the bridge, as it were, since then.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so I just wanted to get things started as just asking you a question. Who is Reuben Brigety?
Oh, goodness. That's actually a pretty complicated question because, like everybody, I'm lots of things. I'm a father. I am a husband. I am a person of faith. I'm a dog owner and a scuba diver. I am a musician and a reader, and I'm a patriot, and I'm a diplomat. And so combining all of those things, and you'd be surprised in ways in which they kind of combine with each other. But I am all those things and more.
Yeah, I love it. And that's just one thing that I'd love to point out to just all of our listeners and viewers that we all have our different titles and different roles that we play when we show up. But that is just a small portion of our lives. And there are many dimensions and layers and just experiences that we bring to the table. And the beautiful thing about that is that we can weave those different things into a number of different experiences and roles. So that is neat.
LG, sure, there's a wonderful Nigerian author named Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. I don't know if you've ever come across her. She wrote a book called, several books called Half of a Yellow Sun and Americana and whatever. She's a good friend of mine. And she also did this TED Talk called The Danger of a Single Narrative.
Oh, yeah,
And
actually, I have
yeah,
seen that. Yeah, yeah.
and the idea is that none of us fit into any one particular storyline. All of us are, compilations of just like a rope is made up of different strands. All of us
I
are,
believe.
different strands of multiple points of our lives. Yeah.
Yeah, that's really powerful. That's really powerful. Yeah, and we'll actually share that TED talk because I remember seeing that a couple years ago, and that was really powerful. Really powerful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now I got another question for you. Since you are in South Africa, I was curious because I'm into music. You're a musician. I'm a musician as well.
Yeah.
But I was curious. Afro beats or Amapiano? What do you think? What do you think?
I think there's only one answer to this question if I don't want to get kicked out of South Africa. The answer is I'm a piano, clearly, which
Okay.
is, what one of the great creative forces developed here in South Africa that's been a great export to the world. Recently I was talking to the brand new foreign minister of South Africa, a man named Ronald Lamola, who's 41 years old. And I was
Hmm.
talking about an initiative that we're doing in the city of Atlanta, which I hope we can talk about later in the podcast. And he
Yeah.
said that, that he was in Atlanta not too long ago and heard Amapiano playing in a restaurant. And he said he felt just like at home.
Oh,
So
yeah.
there we go. Yeah.
I'm a
Only one answer to that
piano.
question. Yeah.
Oh, okay. So I learned something new because I have a bunch of different playlists. I like to exercise and do different things. And I actually got a playlist that has both mixed in. So I should probably pull them apart. Is that what you're saying?
No, no, that's not what I'm saying. Everybody belongs
Oh,
together. It's all good. You don't need to pull anything apart. I'm just saying. If you ask a U.S. ambassador to South Africa if I had to choose, I would choose Amapiano every day and twice on Sunday.
okay. Excellent, excellent. Cool. Now, I wanted to switch gears and actually talk about something that is also made, I guess, popular or made famous in South Africa, but I imagine it spans the entire African continent. And that is the philosophy of Ubuntu. And just
Mm,
wanted to explore that and just get some understanding of it. As I've been reflecting on life, for me, like growing up, I wasn't necessarily aware of the different principles of it. But when I look back and reflect,
mm,
I can see how a number of those different things were lived out and were passed down. And then,
yeah,
I'd say over the last decade or so, got really into it to really just understand what it means. And as I've been doing that, it really helped to amplify a number of things in my lived experience from before with growing up.
yeah,
As you know, sports is one of my lived experiences as well, and then our shared
yeah,
experience in the military. So there are a lot of
yeah.
interesting echoes with it, and I wanted to explore it from the root. And so, curious just to get your definition or just how you understand the philosophy of Ubuntu.
Sure. So Ubuntu is one of South Africa's kind of great gifts to the world,
Mm.
and translated from the Zulu or the Ndebele, depending on the language you use. It basically means "I am because we are,"
Oh,
and it calls us to recognize and uplift our shared humanity. And when I was presenting my credentials officially to become the U.S. ambassador to South Africa, presenting them to the president of the Republic of South Africa, I committed
mhm.
myself and our diplomatic mission here to practice what we call Ubuntu diplomacy.
Ah,
That is, in everything that we do to engage our South African government partners and South African citizens in a spirit of mutual recognition and mutual respect.
ah,
Now, this is, and you talk about, Larry, how, the more you learn about it, the more you kind of recognize, a lot of it from your upbringing and from your engagement in sports. There clearly are echoes in our own military experience. The whole idea
mhm.
of shipmate self,
Yeah,
or on what the strength of one link of the cable depend on the might of the chain. This idea that,
yeah,
that we all find our strength indeed our meaning, truly in connection with each other. Now,
Mm,
in the South African experience, it historically has an even more powerful resonance in the context of the fight against apartheid.
mm,
Which, as our listeners know, was the brutal racist system that governed South Africa officially since 1948 until its end with the advent of multi-party democracy in 1994. And the
hmm.
idea was that, especially in the worst days of apartheid, that in the spirit of Ubuntu, you can't dehumanize somebody else without also dehumanizing yourself,
Oh, huh.
because we are wrapped up in this sense of mutuality, right? So the idea
Mm,
that some people, by virtue of their skin color, were inherently um, less worthy or less human.
mm,
You simply couldn't treat other human beings that way without also diminishing your own humanity.
mm.
And so this spirit of calling for us to recognize our shared humanity is at the heart not only of the successful anti-apartheid struggle, but I would also argue at the heart of much of positive developments around the world.
Wow, that's powerful. So many layers to that. And one thing you mentioned as you were sharing, I just wanted to highlight this for our listeners and viewers. You were talking about on the strength of one link in the cable. So for those who are listening, that is the fifth law of the Navy. And it's funny you mentioned that, Ruben, because I've done a bunch of things in sports. Played college basketball, done a lot of training and coaching, and that is one of my overarching mantras. Almost every player I've worked with have either heard me say that or I've
Yeah,
taught them to recite that. And we have
yeah,
learned what that means in a number of different lights. So that's the fifth law of the Navy for those who are listening.
that's
On
right.
the strength of one link in the cable, dependent the might of the chain. Who knows when thou mayest be tested? So live that thou bearest the
So live thou
strain.
bears the strain.
Yeah.
That's right.
I think our upperclassmen would be proud of us right now, you think?
Indeed. What hopes?
We still
That's
got
right.
it.
Still got it. That's
Yeah,
right.
there we go. Yeah. Now, one thing I did as we were preparing for this, researching just on the philosophy of Ubuntu, AI is something that is very prominent in the world today. It's growing in relevance in a number of different levels. And so I went to Google's Gemini platform and I asked it the same question. I'm just going to read it really quickly,
Mm,
just some of the key points, and see
sure.
see what you think with it here. So let me pull it up. So the major principles of the Ubuntu philosophy are interconnectedness. The core tenet of Ubuntu is that human beings are fundamentally interconnected and interdependent. We exist and thrive in relation to others. Our actions and well being impact the community, and the community's well being impacts us. The second one is community. Ubuntu emphasizes the importance of community and collective responsibility. It prioritizes the needs of the group over individual desires, promoting cooperation and shared goals. The third one, the three of six here, is humanity. Ubuntu defines humanity as being rooted in our relationships with others. We become fully human through the interactions and contributions to the community. Respect, compassion, and empathy towards others are essential. Then the fourth one is sharing. Ubuntu values generosity and sharing resources within the community. It encourages mutual support and the equitable distribution of wealth and opportunities. Harmony is the fifth one. Ubuntu strives for harmony and balance within the community and with the natural world. It emphasizes conflict resolution through dialogue and understanding. And then the last one is respect. Ubuntu promotes respect for all individuals, regardless of their age, status, or background. It encourages listening to different perspectives and valuing diversity. So, how close was it? What do you think?
I think it's pretty close. And what's
Hmm.
not to like? Frankly, as Americans, we have this almost civic creed of individualism, of rugged individualism and freedom, which is important and which I certainly believe in. And I also believe, as most Americans do, that we live in community. various
Yeah.
types of communities, whether it be, physically where we live, or faith communities,
Hmm.
or athletic partnerships, or whatever else. And
Hmm.
the question is, how do we merge, what is quite frankly in our national DNA for, individuals striving and trying to
Hmm.
be the best, with also this sense that we are also, bound with each other, and we that can, lead to tensions, frankly, on any number of things. I would argue you probably saw this most clearly in the COVID response, where on the
Yeah.
one hand, there are a lot of our fellow Americans who believe deeply in the right to not vaccinate or not wear masks, and the
Mm.
COVID virus doesn't care. Uh,
It
and it
does not.
affects
It does not
entire,
distinguish.
right?
Yeah.
Exactly right. And in some ways, we are only all physically safe when we are all physically safe from the spread of this disease. And so, like, that's just kind of one type of example of how we can, work together in
Hmm.
community, being respectful of each other.
Yeah, yeah. We're actually going to dive into that a little bit later here with what the Western world can learn from the principles of Ubuntu. But I love what you were saying there. And yes, that is a very recent and very vivid example of Ubuntu, or the lack of Ubuntu, or those principles
Right.
and the cause and effect of those different things. So, yeah.
Sure.
Now, I'm curious about just a little bit about the background of it. You touched on it a little bit, but when it comes to just the history and kind of where it comes from with Ubuntu, um, any thoughts from there? Just with that from you.
Sure. Well, like lots of good ideas, it has lots of progenitors.
Hmm.
And so, in the context of South Africa, the notion is that it basically originates amongst the Zulu and Ndebele people of South Africa. But quite frankly, you can find like this basic idea amongst many of the indigenous peoples, and tribes of the country, that have different ways of expressing it, different ways of living it. But in the, kind of last few decades, it has come to be emblematic, broadly speaking, of many in South Africa who, in this, rainbow nation, like the
Hmm.
flag right behind me represents,
Hmm.
that belongs to all who live in it, regardless of race or creed or anything else. And it's in that spirit, that is the sort of the national founding myth of modern day South Africa.
Yeah, yeah, that's neat. And so, in essence, it's new but not new. It's something that has been
Exactly.
around for a
Right.
long, long time. And some who may
Right.
not be familiar might think it's not relevant, but it is very relevant because we're human beings, and that's how we're
Indeed.
designed. Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
very powerful. Now, I want to talk a little bit more about how Ubuntu comes to life. You touched on it a little bit earlier, but in just some different things with what's happening in your world, or just with your role, just
Sure.
different ways it comes to life.
Sure. I'll give you two examples. One kind
Hmm.
of more personal, and one kind of more diplomatic, as it were.
Uh-huh.
So, um, as you might expect, as the ambassador, I have a driver that works with me, and this driver's name is Solomon. Has been working with the U.S. Embassy here for 22 years, and Solomon lives about 2 hours away from the embassy, and he's the morning
Oh,
driver. So I have an afternoon driver as well. And so for 2 decades, every morning he gets up at 3 o'clock in the morning to take a bus and then a taxi and then another bus or whatever else in order to be here, ready to
wow.
drive the ambassador first thing in the morning as appointments. And so after I learned about this, I was like, wait a minute, that's some serious commitment. I need to come honor you in your space. And so I brought my wife and my family to his village, 2 hours away. The American ambassador with the big entourage kind of showing up at his village to honor him amongst his
Wow.
people, to say thank you. And the whole village turned out, and it was a great affair. And and I wanted to be able to show how much I, and the both as a person and in the office that I occupy, honor his commitment not only to the mission, but also what that commitment has done in order to build his own community and raise his own family. And so I suspect the fact that the American ambassador came to their village is something people are going to be talking about for a long time.
I
So,
imagine.
in the spirit of Ubuntu, right? And so that's one piece. And then, kind of a broader diplomatic piece. Our relationship, the U.S. relationship with South Africa, is a complex one. There are a lot of things on which we agree, and there are some things, like any other relationship, in which there is some friction. But we wanted to make sure that we have a way to continue to focus and develop on those things in which we do agree. And so it occurred to us that much of what we were trying to do positively with South Africa in terms of healthcare, job creation, technology transfer, logistics, creative industries, all of that is very well represented in the U.S. city of Atlanta.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
A city that also is the cradle of the American civil rights movement, with
Hmm.
deep ties to the anti-apartheid struggle,
Hmm.
and also with, quite frankly, with similarly sized economies,
Oh,
and in a
okay.
city with that is known for Black excellence across many different disciplines in the context of a multiracial environment, which also
Hmm.
resonates deeply here in South Africa. So we launched a program that we call Atlanta Pambili, and
Atlanta Pambili.
Pambili is a Zulu and Xhosa word that means forward. And the idea is that we want to be able to anchor all that we're doing affirmatively with South Africa in the rich ecosystem of the city of Atlanta, even as we continue to adjudicate political differences in our respective political capitals of Washington and Pretoria, South Africa, where I'm sitting right now. And so we invited a high-level delegation of South African government business leaders to Atlanta this past March. We rolled out the red carpet for them and crushed it. We had a meeting with the current mayor of Atlanta. We had a meeting with the former mayor of Atlanta, and Ambassador Andy Young, who was 92
Hmm.
years old. He was able to put the whole
Wow.
relationship, whole historical relationship. He was Martin Luther King's chief lieutenant during the civil rights movement, and so it was just a really great American. We took them to the headquarters of Coca-Cola. We took them to Georgia Institute of Technology. I mean, all kinds of stuff. It was great. And I told them that my strategic objective would be for them to feel that Atlanta is their home away from home in the United States of America.
Wow.
And mission accomplished. So they're very excited, and we are now planning for a reciprocal visit of Atlanta government and business leaders to come here to South Africa before the end of the calendar year. Touch wood. And so, again, in the spirit of recognizing each other, in the spirit of partnership and mutual respect, and being in community with each other, as opposed to, you're telling us this, no, we're going to tell you that, no, let us. There's this beautiful South African phrase that I've learned since I've been here. It is, let us learn to find each other.
Ooh, let us learn to
Uh,
find each other.
find each other. And it
Huh.
means essentially, let us figure out where we can agree, both so that
Hmm.
we can work on where we do agree, and so that we can use the trust that we build from agreeing with each other to address more challenging issues where we may not agree.
Use that as the foundation to lean into more complex things. Wow. Wow, that's really powerful. I love both of them. Yeah, on the individual level with your driver, and then at the systems level, or the at a broader level with Atlanta. Now, that actually is a beautiful transition into the next piece I wanted to talk about is what the Western world can learn from Ubuntu. Atlanta, what you're doing with Atlanta is a great example, but I'm curious
Yeah.
if you have any other thoughts on just things that we can do. As you know, as of the time of this recording, there are a number of high stakes topics that are happening
Yeah.
in the world. Can do a whole nother podcast on all that, but there's a lot going on. But
Yeah.
curious as to just get your thoughts on what the Western world could learn.
Well, first of all, with any engagement, you always want to look for commonalities, and I would expect, as we started this discussion with, there are similarities, cognates, if you will,
Hmm.
in our own various Western philosophies that call for us to, respect each other and respect our common humanity, respect our dignity, and whatever else. And so that in some ways, Ubuntu, as it were, isn't entirely foreign. I mean, we have corollaries in our own societies, but sometimes it might be a matter of emphasis. or it might be a matter of cultural practice, or quite frankly, sometimes it might be a matter of politics. In my basic world outlook, just speaking as a
Hmm.
person, I've generally come to the view that there are basically two types of people in the world: those that can look at people different from themselves and see our common humanity and act accordingly, and those who cannot and do not.
Mm.
And everything is explained by that, because if you can see someone who on the surface appears different from you, so they speak a different language, or they're a different religion, or they live in a different part of the world, but you can look to see for that common human thread. If you can see
Hmm.
your humanity and their humanity, then if you respect your own humanity, you will treat them with the same respect that you expect to be treated.
Yeah.
And that's true not only when, but especially when we are engaging on matters of difference, on
Hmm.
challenging issues that have got to be worked out. And that is not a naive way of seeing the world. Well, if we all just kind of held hands and sang along, we'd all sort of get to know. I mean, there are real serious differences, but that is the work of diplomacy,
Yeah. That is
to
powerful.
figure out where we can find our way through, where we can find each other, right?
Hmm.
In the midst of discord, in the midst of disagreement, and quite frankly, even in the midst of very violent disagreement, and try to find ways where we can, you know, um, build a better future together.
Yeah. Well, that's powerful. And yeah, a number of just things with that. And you're actually reminding me of, I mentioned it earlier, just with my lived experience growing up. A lot of these principles were just woven in, from
Yeah,
grandma, grandpa, and all the people that were around me.
yeah,
And one thing with me, with how it shows up today, is I try to practically show up just with a heart of kindness and generosity with whatever we're doing. And just doing that as just a literal practical thing, and then from there, it can for me it can you can find it easy to find those common connections and then build from there. But it's interesting how you talked about two different people, because sometimes I've interacted with people, and I got a number of examples throughout my careers where those who see kindness and generosity, they can, I'll say, they can confuse kindness and generosity with being naive, or they see it as an
that's right.
opportunity to take advantage. And that's when especially when I see it and we try to navigate, that's when it becomes a problem for me. And then
Yeah,
we got to work
yeah,
through
yeah,
that, those types of things there, because it just fundamentally goes against how I was brought up, and a lot of everything what we're just talking about here, just with the spirit of humanity, um, and being generous, and especially if you see somebody who's different, instead of leading with a spirit of being threatened, maybe with curiosity or a heart to be welcoming and explore where those common areas are. And so, yeah, it's definitely powerful. A number of amazing things that you just shared that are extremely relevant today with all the different topics that we have going on. So, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and I wanted to just end things out just with one last question about how might we practice Ubuntu in our everyday life. We've touched on a number of great examples, and for our listeners and viewers, you've already gotten a good treasure trove of different things. But I wanted to give you the opportunity to share any other, very practical things that one can do to practice this.
sure. I'll just say a couple of things. I'm a sophophile, meaning I'm a lover of wisdom. I tell my team here, I tend to think in stories and think in moonlights.
Same here. Yeah.
Everybody understands stories, right? And so, um, Winston Churchill, great, wartime leader of World War II in Great Britain, once said that courage is the most important virtue because it's the one that enables all the others.
Mm,
It takes courage to love. It takes courage to tell the truth. It takes courage to extend yourself to someone who may be different from you.
hmm.
It takes courage to engage somebody that may present in ways that you don't understand and may even be hostile.
Hmm.
But developing and practicing courage is essential. And the thing is, I mean, you're an athlete. I mean, you would never say, you know what, I haven't been to the gym in about 2 years, but I'm going to go out and like try to play in the NBA. You have to train over time. The same thing is true with courage.
Mm.
You have to practice courage in small amounts when the stakes are relatively low. Otherwise, you'll never be able to call on it when the stakes are higher. And I would submit that the practice of Ubuntu requires courage. um, to the courage to extend yourself into a greater sense of shared humanity when the safer thing, like a turtle, is to kind of look and kind of guard it into
Mhm.
your own, right? And there are any number of ways in which all of us can do that on a daily basis. One other kind of thing that I think about a lot is just because something is not happening to you does not mean that it is not happening.
Wow. Yeah.
And of any type of human experience, whether that is the way in which we experience the world because of gender differences, the way in which we experience the world because we have more resources versus less, the way we experience the world because we're in what many would argue is a position of higher professional status versus one that is not, and being self-consciously aware of that and being prepared to listen to someone else's story and see somebody else in their humanity is a very practical way to build the moral muscle memory that is necessary
Wow.
to practice Ubuntu.
Yeah, that is great. And one thing with courage, as I'm listening to you, I'm also thinking about how courage is a choice. You can choose to
Absolutely.
be courageous in a number of different moments, and especially when the stakes are low, as you mentioned, because that's a great opportunity to practice courage. So when the stakes are high or when there's more at stake or the moments are bigger, you have that muscle memory, which is definitely a sports thing. And it's true in all
Yeah,
other areas of life. Well,
yeah,
great. Yeah.
absolutely.
Well, I have really enjoyed this conversation, Ruben. I definitely
My
appreciate your
pleasure. My
time.
pleasure. Of
This
course.
conversation was a practice of Ubuntu, and just really being
Indeed.
able to share and exchange. And so, definitely
Yeah.
just grateful for our time together, and I appreciate it.
Great. Thank you, brother. And thanks to all your listeners. Thank you so much. Take good care.
Wow. Now, that was a 100 level conversation. The definition of Ubuntu: I am because we are. And it's all about our shared humanity. You can't dehumanize someone without dehumanizing yourself. Now, here in the Western world, individualism is a thing, but community is also a thing. And so, how might we balance both and navigate the tensions that can potentially come from that? One thing that Reuben shared that was really powerful was that there are basically two types of people in the world: those who see people who are different than they are, but yet they can see and find that common thread of humanity and act accordingly, and those who cannot. Which one are you? The next thing that Reuben shared, which is really, really powerful, was another African proverb called "Let us learn to find each other." And that's about taking the effort to find where we can agree, using that as the foundation and building from there. And then the last thing he shared is that the practice of Ubuntu simply comes down to courage. And courage enables all of the other virtues. So, how might Ubuntu be the through line or the golden thread with how you show up and how you interact with others? Thanks for watching 100 Level, and we'll see you next time.